I left my coffee on the counter that morning, and I never went back for it. That's the detail I keep coming back to. Not the argument, not the papers I'd been carrying in my jacket pocket for 3 weeks. Just that cup of coffee, still warm, sitting on the granite countertop my son-in-law had picked out when they remodeled my kitchen without asking me. My kitchen. I need to say that again because I spent 41 years making it mine. I bought that house in 1983 when mortgage rates were at 13% and everyone said I was out of my mind. My wife, Lorraine, cried when she saw the backyard. Not sad crying, the other kind. We raised our daughter there. Painted the nursery twice because the first yellow was too yellow. Built a deck in 1994 that nearly cost me 3 fingers. Planted a dogwood tree by the mailbox that Lorraine always said looked crooked but secretly loved. When she passed, 6 years ago, pancreatic cancer, 11 weeks from diagnosis to the end, I stayed in that house because leaving felt like losing her twice. My daughter, Stephanie, moved back in 8 months after Lorraine died. She said it was to take care of me. I believed her. That was my first mistake. She came with her husband, Craig. Craig sold something in tech. I was never entirely sure what, but he talked about it constantly and with enormous confidence. He had the kind of handshake that's slightly too firm, like he's been practicing. I'd always been polite with him. Lorraine had been warmer. After she died, I think Craig assumed the warmth had died with her, and he no longer needed to perform the formalities. He was not wrong about that, exactly, but he was wrong about what it meant. The changes started small. That's always how it starts, I think. Small things you wave off, because you don't want to be the difficult father-in-law, the old man who can't adapt. They rearranged the living room. Fine. Stephanie said the new layout got more natural light. Craig replaced the thermostat with a smart device I needed help to operate. Fine. Stephanie started handling my mail because I'd missed a dental bill. Once, I missed it once. And suddenly that became a system. Fine. I told myself fine so many times that year that the word stopped meaning anything. The first real sign came on a Tuesday in March. I came downstairs at 7 in the morning and found a woman I didn't know sitting at my kitchen table with a notepad. Stephanie was pouring coffee like this was completely normal. She introduced the woman as someone from a senior living community out near the highway. The woman slid a brochure across the table toward me and smiled the smile that people practice for delivering bad news. I sat down. I looked at the brochure. I looked at Stephanie. Stephanie said that it might be worth exploring some options. Options, I said, for your future. Dad, you've been alone in this big house. I'm not alone. You're here. She looked at Craig, who was standing in the doorway with his coffee. That look, that sideways glance that means the real conversation has already happened without you. We can't be here forever, Craig said. We have our own lives to build. I picked up the brochure. I set it back down. I thanked the woman for coming, told her I'd look it over, and went back upstairs to get dressed. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time. Lorraine's reading glasses were still on the nightstand. I'd moved them once, put them in a drawer, and then taken them back out the same afternoon. They didn't need to be there, but I needed them to be there. I thought about what Craig had said. We have our own lives to build. In my house. In the house I owned, where I paid the taxes, where my name was the only one on the deed. I started paying closer attention after that. It didn't take long. I have a habit from my accounting days, 34 years as a CPA, most of it running my own practice, of writing things down, not on my phone, not on a computer. In a small notebook with a black cover. I've kept one since 1979. My daughter used to make fun of me for it, Dad in his little book. I wrote down dates, times, what was said, who was in the room, old habit. I never thought it would matter this much. 3 weeks after the brochure incident, I heard them in the kitchen after they thought I'd gone to sleep. I'd come back down for my blood pressure medication and stopped at the bottom of the stairs. Craig was talking. He had a voice that carried, another thing he'd never noticed about himself. The property assessment came back at $880, he said. If we list in spring, we're looking at $950, maybe more. He'll never agree to sell, Stephanie said. He doesn't have to agree. He just has to. A pause. Not be here. I stood there in the dark hallway in my socks, and I felt something go very quiet inside me. Not anger. Something older and colder than anger. I went back upstairs. I did not take my medication. I sat at the desk where I used to do my tax work, and I thought carefully, not quickly. carefully. There's a difference, and the difference matters more than people realize. They were wrong about several things. They were wrong that I was confused. They were wrong that I was fragile. And they were wrong, most importantly, about the house. I'd set up a revocable living trust in 2019. Lorraine and I had done it together, with our estate attorney. When Lorraine passed, the house transferred into the trust automatically. My name wasn't just on the deed, I was the sole trustee, which meant that without my signature and my explicit instruction, nothing happened to that property. Nothing. Craig could research property assessments all he wanted. He was assessing something he did not own and would not inherit without my specific direction. I called my attorney the next morning. His name is Wallace. He's been our family's attorney since Clinton was in office, and he has no patience for nonsense, which is one of the reasons I've kept him so long. I told him what I'd heard. He was quiet for a moment. "Do you want to change the trust?" he asked. "Not yet," I said. "I want to understand what my options are first." "Your options," he said, "are quite broad." I also called my doctor that week and had a full cognitive evaluation done, not because I needed it, because I knew that at some point someone might suggest I did, and I wanted documentation that said otherwise, dated before any conflict arose. It's the kind of move that only makes sense if you're thinking clearly. My doctor, a sharp woman who has zero tolerance for people wasting her time, noted in the report that I was, and I'm quoting, alert, oriented, and demonstrating sound judgment. I framed it in my head and hung it there. Meanwhile, at home, the campaign continued. They started including me less. Dinner became something that happened after I'd already eaten. Plans were discussed in rooms I wasn't in. Craig began bringing people over. A contractor who walked through the house taking notes. A man I'm nearly certain was a realtor, though he never introduced himself as one. I was always introduced as Stephanie's father, and then the conversation moved on around me, like water around a rock. My grandson was the only thing that made those months bearable. Noah is 8. He's my son Marcus's boy. Marcus lives in Denver. We talk every Sunday. He'd offered to fly out when things got tense, but I told him not yet. Noah stays with me every summer for a month, while Marcus and his wife do their work travel. He'd been doing it since he was 5. It was our arrangement, our thing. Those summer weeks were the best part of my calendar. What I hadn't told anyone yet was that Marcus had called me in February, not about the house, not about Stephanie, to ask if I would consider having Noah come live with me permanently. Not forever, but for a stretch. Marcus's wife had been transferred. They were looking at an international assignment. The school situation was complicated, and Noah was struggling with the instability. Marcus trusted me. He said so directly. "Dad, I trust you with him. If you're willing." I was willing. But I hadn't said anything about it yet because the timing wasn't right. I was still mapping the terrain. The thing that broke the surface happened on a Thursday in May. I'd been out, a doctor's appointment, a stop at the hardware store, nothing significant, and when I came home the side door was unlocked and there were voices in the den. I let myself in quietly, not intending to eavesdrop, just moving at the pace I always move. Stephanie was on the phone. She didn't hear me come in. "Honestly think he'll just go along with it if we frame it right," she was saying. "He's been getting more forgetful." I stood in the hallway. "Wallace can draft the paperwork. We just need to establish that he needs help managing his affairs." The doctor's appointment last month, he couldn't remember the name of his medication. I remembered the name of my medication. I'd been on it for 9 years. And then we petitioned for guardianship. Craig says, if we do it right, it doesn't even have to go to a full hearing. I walked past the doorway without stopping. She didn't see me. I went to my study, sat down at my desk, and opened my black notebook. I wrote down the date and time. I wrote down what I'd heard word for word, as close as I could get. Then I sat back and looked at the ceiling for a while. Guardianship. They were going to pursue legal guardianship, which would give them control not just of the house, but of my finances, my medical decisions, my entire life. They would use a misremembered medication name from a routine appointment where I'd been fighting a sinus infection as evidence that I was losing my mind. I thought about Lorraine, about what she would have said. She would have said, "Call Wallace tonight." I called Wallace that evening from my car parked 2 blocks away. He was, as I said, not a patient man, but he was a thorough one. By the end of the call, we had a plan. The first step was documentation. I already had the cognitive evaluation. Wallace scheduled a formal review of the trust and updated it. Still revocable, still mine, but with an additional layer that made any third-party petition for guardianship significantly harder to pursue and required independent medical evaluation from a physician of my choosing, not one they could influence. The second step was harder and took me longer. I started quietly moving my financial life, not hiding money, nothing illegal, nothing improper. But I had savings accounts, investment accounts, a pension from the years before I ran my own practice. I consolidated. I made sure every account had current beneficiary designations that reflected what I actually wanted, not defaults I'd set 20 years ago. I had Wallace draft a durable power of attorney naming Marcus, not Stephanie, as my agent for financial and medical decisions. Marcus cried a little when I told him, just a little, and he recovered fast, but I heard it. The third step was the house. I called a realtor, not Craig's contact, mine. A woman I'd found through my neighbor who'd worked with her twice and trusted her completely. Her name was Patricia Chen, and within 10 minutes of talking to her, I understood why my neighbor trusted her. She was direct, she was fast, and when I explained my situation, briefly, without editorializing, she simply said, "Okay, when do you want to list?" We listed in June. I did not tell Stephanie and Craig. I am the sole trustee of the property. The trust authorizes me to sell, lease, or transfer the property at my discretion. There is no legal requirement that I inform anyone living in the property as guests, which is what they were. I had never added them to any lease agreement because there was no lease agreement. They had moved in and stayed, and I had allowed it, and I could stop allowing it. This is the part where people ask, was that legal? Yes. Was it kind? Perhaps not entirely, but I want you to understand what they were planning to do to me. They were going to have a court declare me incompetent. They were going to take over my accounts, my decisions, my life. I had the documentation. I had the phone call. I had 3 months of a notebook full of dates and times and exact words. I was not the one who started this. I arranged everything while they were in Phoenix for Craig's company conference. 5 days. Patricia moved quickly. We'd had the listing ready, the photography done while they were at work. An open house the first weekend they were gone. We had an offer within 9 days, a good one. 94% of asking price, clean financing, 30-day close. I accepted it. The closing happened on a Wednesday. I signed the papers at Wallace's office. Patricia was there. Wallace was there. I wore the suit I'd worn to Lorraine's sister's wedding 20 years ago. It still fit, mostly. The house sold for $920,000. Before the closing, I'd already moved what was mine into a storage unit and made arrangements with my neighbor, a retired schoolteacher named Helen, who has been my friend for 19 years, and who, when I explained everything, said, "Good for you," with an emphasis that made me feel about 20 years younger. I'd stayed with Helen for the closing period, which she seemed to genuinely enjoy. I flew to Denver 2 days after closing. Marcus picked me up at the airport with Noah, who barreled into me at the arrivals hall and nearly knocked me down, which is exactly what I needed. We found a good rhythm, the three of us. Marcus arranged for me to use the guest suite that connects to Noah's room, and I help with school pickup, homework, dinner, the ordinary things that I was starting to forget I was good at. Noah has a routine now. He does better with routine. So do I, as it turns out. Stephanie and Craig came home from Phoenix on a Thursday evening. I know this because my neighbor Helen texted me. She said they pulled up in Craig's car, went to the front door, and found it locked with a lockbox on the handle. On the front door I had left an envelope. Inside the envelope was a letter. It was not a long letter. 3 paragraphs. The first explained that the house had been sold and that they had 30 days. This was more than legally required, to collect any personal belongings from the storage facility where I'd placed them, the address of which was included. The second paragraph noted that I was aware of the guardianship conversation and that my attorney had documentation of the same. The third paragraph said that I wished them well and did not expect to hear from them. I also left a copy of the cognitive evaluation, dated 4 months prior, just so there was no confusion about my state of mind when I made these decisions. Helen said she could hear the yelling from across the street. I was in Denver when Marcus showed me her text. Noah was doing his spelling homework at the kitchen table, his tongue poking out a little the way it does when he's concentrating. The evening light was coming through the window over the sink at that particular angle that makes everything look like it's been placed deliberately. I thought about Lorraine's crooked dogwood tree. I thought about 34 years of careful records and an old trust document and a cup of coffee I'd left sitting on a granite countertop I'd never chosen. I didn't say anything for a while. Then Noah looked up from his homework and said, "Grandpa, how do you spell believe?" I told him. And that was the end of it, really. Not the end of all the paperwork. Not the end of phone calls from Stephanie that I let go to voicemail. Not the end of the logistical sorting out that a life transition always requires. But the end of the fear, the end of the watching, the end of lying awake cataloging what they might do next. I took that old black notebook out of my jacket pocket the night after Noah's homework was done and everyone was in bed, and I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of water. I thought about writing something in it. Instead, I closed it and put it in the drawer by the refrigerator, next to the takeout menus, and a flashlight that probably needs new batteries. Some records don't need to be kept. Some things you write down so you can finally put them away.